Hey guys, Wyatt Claypool here. On the show today, there are a few topics that I want to tackle, going over the longest ballot committee shenanigans in Battle River Crowfoot, Mark Carney effectively fully backing off his promises to get a pipeline done, and then I also want to discuss a topic at the end that a lot of people do not know about at all, but if you're in British Columbia, you will want to hear about, and that is the massive debt issues going on inside the BC Conservative Party. But we will start from the top, first going over the 194 plus candidate ballot that is in the Battle River Crowfoot by election, where Pierre is running to get a seat back in Parliament. This is obviously stupid. We have talked about the story in previous videos. I had always been saying 120 candidates, 130 candidates, because these are the reasonable numbers that had been thrown out of where people thought the ballot was going to finish. And unbeknownst to myself, we have completely shattered those numbers, and now the ballot is at 194 names as I currently speak. We are about to go look at what that ballot currently looks like, at least on the Elections Canada website. But first, I actually do want to plug the investigation that Northern Perspectives released yesterday. Ryan did a fantastic job showing how this is probably illegal. I would say it's definitely illegal because they are going to candidates, people that may be candidates, haven't put their names forward yet, haven't decided if they want to run, saying, don't worry, we've already collected your signatures for you, which means that they were falsely getting people to sign papers for people who were not running. No names were on the lists as people were signing for candidates that did not yet exist. And that seems to probably violate a few regulations of the Canada Elections Act. But what do I know? Maybe this is all above board. It is telling that the Liberal Party has not dealt with this. And by the way, I will be linking the Northern Perspectives video from yesterday in the description below. Guys, go check that out if you want to watch it, or you're probably subscribed to them. Just go check it out on their own channel. Again, very, very good investigative work by them. But it's telling that the Liberals have not fixed this. This would take approximately 5 seconds to fix. In fact, they could have fixed it during the spring session of Parliament because Damien Carrick didn't resign his seat so that Poilievre could run in the by-election until the end of spring session. This wasn't like something where they had to call the by-election midway through the session so there wasn't enough time to change the law. This is something that could be easily changed through just a single line Canada Elections Act edit, basically saying that one guy cannot be the financial agent, he cannot be the official agent for every single candidate. That's not, you can't have the same guy being the financial agent and the official agent, whatever agent, for the candidates. Very simple, and the Liberals would not do it. There's some other edits you could also make to it to also prevent other schemes from taking place that don't actually restrict reasonable people from trying to run. But the Liberals, I think, deliberately did not want to tackle this issue, despite them being called on to do it, not just by the Conservative Party, but also I believe, not the CEO, but it's like the Commissioner of Elections Canada. He stood up in a parliamentary committee holding up the ridiculous ballot that was in, I'm not even sure if it was the Carleton one. It might have just been the Toronto St. Paul or LaSalle Amard Verdun one, saying that this cannot go on. And that's back when the ballot was like, almost a meter long. The ballot in Carleton was a meter long. One of the guys from the Longest Ballot Committee made a joke about posing with the ballot, showing that if he taped it onto his wall, it was in fact longer than he was, which also does demonstrate that he might be a pretty short guy. But this is the current list of candidates. And you'll notice that when you look at name of official agent, reasonable candidates in terms of not joke candidates, although I very heavily disagree with the politics of Grant Abraham. You have Rita Moore as the official agent. You go down a little bit more here. Let's try to find a different name. Pierre Poilievre, his official agent is Scott Coleman. Okay, cool. But you'll notice a lot of these Thomas names. And this is not a very big family, and these are all unique Thomases. This is a single Thomas doing all of this. And the good thing is he has a unique spelling of his name, Thomas. So if I just look up Thomas without the TH, it's a Tomas, Thomas, there is 185 results when I do a Command F. And when I actually counted all the names on the list, which was not easy because they're not numbered, there was 194 candidate names. And by the way, there is still a few more days to register more candidates. And by the way that these people have been going about it, I have no doubt they may be able to get it up to 200, since, again, based on what Northern Perspectives has reported, based on the emails that the Longest Ballot Committee are sending to their own prospective candidates, they're telling them, we already have your signatures. So what they are seemingly doing is just getting a bunch of people in the riding to sit down and just sign, their name, their signature to lists for like an hour. Just sign it 250 times, and then so we can just keep handing out more finished pieces of paperwork to people who may want to run out in Montreal, and they'll just go to some sort of way of like a register or whatever to be able to sign that piece of paper and scan it back. It's stupid, but whatever. I guess this is democracy in Canada right now. We couldn't somehow solve this. The Liberals needed this to go on. And again, this is extremely abusive to people with mobility issues, to the people who are having to count the ballots, people with sight issues, having to sign a ballot, which, by the way, was 1 meter when it was almost 100 candidates and Poilievre's running. That was 91. It is currently more than double that right now, and it might get past 200. So this is going to be a 2-meter long ballot, because there are regulations to how big the bubbles have to be, to how prominent the names have to be, as reasonable ballots should. You can't make one person's name like extremely small, or basically mess with the coloring between names. Everything has to be done a very specific way. You can't just say, well, more people want to vote for Poilievre than a bunch of these joke candidates, so make his name bigger. You can't do that. Everything must be done in this way. I guess over time, the people that are marking counting the ballots are going to figure out what the bubbles are that people fill in the most. So they'll go down to Poilievre's bubble first, and then they'll go to maybe the Liberal candidates next, and then they'll go to Bonnie Crickley's bubble after that. But the whole thing has been made a complete farce out of. And by the way, there are small independent candidates who are serious. And now they look like a bunch of idiots because they're on the ballot with a bunch of people who are signing their names to this, who live in Toronto or Montreal, or they're on Prince Edward Island, or they're in the Yukon, whatever. Okay, we can move on from that issue. And by the way, guys, if you like the show, do make sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video, leave a comment. What do you think about all this? I genuinely think we're at the point where you could criminally charge these people, and that would not at all be wrong. So we need to now move on to Mark Carney obviously breaking his promise to build a pipeline, to get major projects done. This was announced on the CBC's Power and Politics on the weekend. So it's not David Cochrane hosting, but we have this host announcing that the Carney Liberal government, and notice how this wasn't a press release by the Carney Liberals. This was not an announcement where Carney came out and put his own face to this commitment. They're slowly sliding this out because it's obviously not a good thing. Just like him slowly trying to downplay the fact that he's not going to get a good trade deal signed with the Americans, he's now slowly trying to leak out the idea that he's not going to get any major energy projects done. So check this out.
Mark Carney has offered reassurances plans for major projects won't violate modern treaties. This comes amid Carney's push to assure Indigenous leaders there will be full consultation on major projects.
It fully respects treaty-based environmental assessment processes. In fact, those will be essential for anything that we move forward.
Just drop that in the middle of a press conference. Nothing really to it. What he said there, and he said it in the most boring way possible, where the media had to interpret what he was saying as rightfully so, that he's not going to get any projects done. He's going to go through the full consultation. Obviously, the CBC didn't say it in the partisan way I'm saying it, but I'm saying it in the real way, and what this actually means. A full consultation means potentially years before a project can even get approved. And a project being approved doesn't mean shovels in the ground the next day. It means that we can start the process of actually, getting permits and whatnot to put shovels in the ground. Because you're not going to permit a project and then make them go through the consultations. They had to go through the consultations first. And then there's still going to be eco-activists challenging them or trying to hold up the projects in their own irregular ways. This is stupid. And by the way, now, this is actually something I didn't predict, but Wab Kinew is now also saying that he will not approve a pipeline without Indigenous approval, without Indigenous consultation. I had to go find this clip. I think I ended up burying it on myself. This was one of those things where I actually thought he was maybe going to be somewhat serious about trying to get a pipeline built to Hudson's Bay, but immediately he's pulled back on that and says he's no longer wanting to do it. Can I find the clip here? If I cannot find the clip, I don't think it matters too much, but you can take my word for it. I did in fact see that, but we're not getting anything done. Oh, and by the way, do you know something else that popped up yesterday? This story right here. Thank you for Alberta Secession Y for posting this. Quote, Canada's Indigenous communities are seeking deals with China that could give Beijing access to the country's natural resources. Canadian Indigenous groups seek deals with China despite security fears. So when I see Indigenous band councils, not individual Indigenous people would probably say approve the projects. They're good for the country. What the heck are you guys doing? It's the band councils who are in the business of holding up projects in order for checks to be signed. And so also the politics of it are so left-wing anti-colonialist. They won't work with the Canadian government because that is who they have painted as the enemy. But they will go and sign deals with Beijing, the Chinese Communist Party, who, starved 50 million people to death in their own country. Yeah, let's sign a deal with them so that they can have access to natural resources, mines, oil and gas, lumber, all that stuff. Because, well, at least they're not colonialists. They just shoot people in the back of the head into a ditch because they weren't the part of the right party in China. Whatever. But yeah, so we have Wab Kinew saying now he won't actually approve a pipeline without Indigenous consultation and full, consent and approval. We have Carney saying, well, I'm saying yes, but the Indigenous people are saying no, so I can't say yes. He's not saying yes if he's basically outsourcing saying no to somebody else. That's effectively what he's doing. And then we have Indigenous groups now trying to sign deals with Beijing, which should immediately have every Canadian politician rightfully say, okay, I don't care about your opinion anymore. You're being ridiculous. I don't care. I'm not going to go through this artificial consultation process when we can just bypass you because this is all crown land. Very triflingly little land in Canada is actually real reserve land. If you're building a pipeline, you should be able to go all around it. But because in provinces like British Columbia and in Canada in general, we either pass legislation like DRIPA that requires us to honor these overly expansive title land guarantees where basically everything in the province of British Columbia becomes title land under DRIPA rules. Now nothing can get done. And in Canada, we don't have that passed, but we have motions saying that we're going to be respecting UNDRIP, which is what Carney is effectively doing by now saying, we're not going to do any big projects without full consultation, which means we're not going to do it because he's a political coward. He is effectively just another liberal politician who doesn't want to get into a fight with the Indigenous band leaders. Whatever. But this leads us to now talking about our last topic, which is British Columbia provincial politics. Full disclosure, I work for the One BC Party and the two MLAs, Dallas Brody and Tara Armstrong. I also will mention I basically make nothing doing it because I don't like how much people pay themselves in party politics to do things that should be given reasonable salaries to, but so often people are getting over hundreds of thousands of dollars in order to basically do nothing. So the BC Conservative Party, and this is all to say, why did I eventually not want to help with the BC Conservative Party anymore? Well, not only have they basically shredded their platform since the election, that party is no longer against DRIPA, the Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act that makes it impossible to build anything. They're not really against it anymore. I have a tape from a podcast, Mo Amir's show on Czech News, Angelo Isidoro, the executive director of the BC Conservative Party, went on that podcast with Mo Amir, and when he was trying to find an example in his head of things that should be up for a free vote, he said that DRIPA should be a free vote because not everyone in caucus agrees. Sorry? Not everyone in caucus agrees on DRIPA. That was part of the platform to repeal it, but now we're no longer repealing it because people like Peter Millibar, Alia Warbus, Eleanor Sturko, Gavin Dew, Scott McInnes, and a lot of other very liberal MLAs no longer want to get rid of it. And so, well, what was the point of running as a BC Conservative? Well, they're really just BC Liberals trying to stay in office or trying to get into office. Now they're not even against SOGI. I have showed in previous episodes that the BC Conservatives' proposed legislation to not repeal SOGI, but to change SOGI is a nothing. It's like, let's make a committee that overlooks whether certain books should be in schools or not. I know Alberta's kind of doing that, but they also explicitly are trying to ban certain books as well, with saying that the committee must ban books that are like this, which means they're automatically on a ban list. But the thing is that Alberta doesn't have SOGI, really. The thing is, BC does. So passing a law that would modify SOGI just to make sure that we don't have like outright explicit books in libraries is like maybe 10% of the problem. The main problem is the SOGI program that is in the classroom. I really doubt many kids are taking out these inappropriate books. It's symbolic of the problem. It's a symptom of the problem. But do you think a kid is really going and getting the book Genderqueer and showing it to his friends without being made fun of? Not at all, because it's a weird book that you shouldn't be reading. But it's symptomatic of the crazy stuff that's going on in the classroom. Teaching kids gender theory, teaching overly sexual politics in the classroom. That's wrong. And now and then the BC Conservatives also rigged their AGM. I'm not even kidding. They just basically bust in a bunch of people because John was not going to get the slate he wanted. So bust in 100 guys who didn't pay for tickets so that they can just vote, put ballots in a ballot box and say that whatever John wants, John gets, and he gets to keep around the executives, literally giving themselves $177,000 bonuses after they lost the election. Is that technically in their contract? Sure, but what reasonable member would think that that's okay, that based on the metrics of how many seats and votes the party got, that you as the executive director or other people in the party can get up to $177,000 in a single bonus on top of your already fairly fat salary, like making $40,000 during the writ period of the election alone? No, that's inappropriate. And who could have thunk that the party that was giving out $177,000 bonuses, fat contracts to terrible advertising firms, is now in $4.5 million in debt. And that's after I take away cash on hand. Check this out. And by the way, guys, check out the 1BC website. It's literally just the numeral 1, bc.ca. 1bc.ca. Check out our platform. Check out what we're trying to do. By the way, we're solvent. We aren't $4.5 million in debt. Who would give money to these people, knowing that you're not going to have any, if you give money to the BC Conservatives, it's going to fat salaries and it's going to debt repayment. Even if they put every dollar of the per vote subsidy that they get every year to debt repayment, it will take them a full 3 years to pay it off, assuming that their expenses hit zero. And I guarantee you that their expenses are not zero. Good job, Robert McRudden. Good job. You have now put the party, or at least the people you've been enabling have put the party into, let's see, $4,551,654.22 of debt. Because look, column A, they have $543,393.20 cash on hand. Total assets. Total current liabilities and long-term liabilities is a total of $5,095,000. And then when you take cash on hand out, they are at a total of that $4,551,000 in debt. And $1 million debt is current liabilities. That's not even long-term liabilities, and they couldn't even pay off their current liabilities with their cash on hand. No wonder their actual quarterly fundraising in 2025 has been terrible. Who'd want to give money to the people who are burning it on nothing? But whatever. What do I know? I just don't know anything, apparently. because I keep having people say, people in BC just want to get the BC NDP out of government. Stop criticizing the Conservatives. Well, these guys can't win. They can't even host. They couldn't even pay for like anything. They're literally completely screwed. So this actually does warrant a new party at this point, a party that isn't going to be spending the next 3 years just trying to get to zero debt. And then you get 1 year to maybe fundraise enough to take on the NDP. By the way, I'm not cherry picking just what the BC Conservatives currently have in their assets, like their debts and credits. The NDP has $4 million on hand. They don't have any debt and they have $4 million. The BC Conservatives cannot beat these people right now. And then they've also shredded their entire platform. So if they did win, they wouldn't get anything done. One of their MLAs, Harman Bangu, the other day, his critique of the NDP was so shallow, it was like hilarious. He was saying that the NDP spend too much, so we should start canceling infrastructure projects. It's like, goodness, the one area of government I would actually endorse spending more in would be infrastructure. Yes, there's massive cost overruns in these infrastructure projects. If you cut red tape and you sped up processes and and with these government contracts for construction companies, developers, you wouldn't let them have these large cost overruns without actually penalizing them, you could actually solve this. You're gonna cancel the Pattullo Bridge that's almost done because the cost overruns, it's almost done, that bridge. I could even maybe agree that it's probably cost too much, but the thing's almost done. But Harman in this interview entraps himself by saying, oh, we're spending too much. And the interviewer's like, would you cancel or pause any project? He's like, I would. And then he's like, so which projects? And it was a friendly interview. And Harman's like, oh, crap. I got to think of a project I'd cancel. And the one project he said I'd definitely not cancel is this tunnel that hasn't even been started. And then he's going to cancel a bridge that's almost done. Like we're like a few meters away from connecting it to the other side so that people can start driving again. But whatever. What do I know about politics, guys? But again, if you live in British Columbia, check out the One BC party. We're going to be back in session in October, and hopefully we're going to get a lot of good work done with the party. Tara Armstrong and Dallas Brody being the leader, are going to have way more time to speak since they're not just independents anymore. They are now the fourth party in the legislature after the Greens. In fact, we have the same amount of MLAs as the Greens, but first come, first serve. They were the official third party first, so now we have to be the fourth. Maybe we can grab up a BC Conservative MLA and we can have three, and then we become the official third party. But that's a goal for the future. Anyways, so that's it for me today, guys. See you all later.